All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our only meeting in August 15th, 2022. Seems like Judy is well rested, and actually, it seems like other council members are doing pretty well also. I know Mary Ann just tackled half of the Pittsburgh to DC routes, and there's Carmen Brown in the mix. Good to see you. We were just talking about everyone being relaxed after having a month off. Hey, Paige, how you doing? So welcome everyone, and let's go ahead and call the roll.
Yes, Housh.
I'm here.
Stokes.
Here.
McQueen. Here. Brown.
Here.
Leonard.
Here.
Also present are Village Manager Josue Salmarón, Public Works Director Johnny Burns, and Chief of Police Paige Burge.
Okay, so we are gonna start out as always with announcements, and we have one official announcement. So glad to have Hope Taft here. Cris, great to meet you. And if you guys wanna come up to the mic and tell us a little bit about what's going on river-wise, that'd be great.
Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you for having us. As I said, my name is Cris Barnett. I'm part of the Little Miami Watershed Network with Hope Taft and Bill Sheeman. We came to talk with you tonight about a survey that was done on the Little Miami in 2021. It was an economic survey about the value of the Little Miami River. There are slides behind me and behind you. You're welcome to follow along. I don't read them all, so if you want to read them while I speak, if you can double do that, you do better than I can, because I can't do that. But let's talk a little bit about the organization, and if you want to go ahead and flip slides for me, there you go. The Little Miami River is 115 miles long. It starts, the headwaters start just north of here and run all the way to Cincinnati. And the majority of the river flows through suburbia, through quiet, undisturbed areas until it gets to the Cincinnati area. And we want to keep it that way. And part of what the Little Miami Watershed Network is about, go ahead, you can flip that, is the preservation and conservation of the river itself. And we wanted to know what that river meant to folks and what the value of that river is. We have gotten asked quite often, so what's it worth? And if we have to quantify that, we needed some data and we needed some information. And I know that's a strange question, isn't it? But
yeah, well, that's only looking at one.
Yep.
Because clearly it's.
And a lot of folks, that's all they look at is the monetary value. So for us to justify and for us to be able to answer that question, we put together a survey with the help of Ohio State to answer that. Go ahead. Our organization is project oriented. We deal mostly with river cleanups, restoration efforts, stewardship. That's what we're all about. Go ahead. But we opted that one of our big projects, and actually it was to be in 2020, but of course we all know what happened in 2020. And with the pandemic going on, we felt that it wasn't the best time to do a survey. So we waited until 2021. And working with Dr. Brent Songen out of Ohio State University, we put together a 7-month-long study of 43 miles of the river. Now, why didn't we do it all? First of all, that's cumbersome. Second of all, we wanted to do our community because we wanted to know what was happening in our area of the river. We had 24 volunteers help us with that. One of your own Yellow Springs students was actually one of those volunteers. So very proud of that. Another one of your local residents was one of our volunteers, a lady by the name of Ruth Lapp. Ruth helped us with that project also. It's unprecedented to have volunteers conduct a 7-month-long study. Typically, you end up paying people to help you survey. In this case, the folks were so interested in the river and the bike path that they were more than willing to spend their time. Go ahead. Nope, it didn't go. Oh, there it is. The Recreational impact, the surveys took place in 45 sites along the river. Now, all 45 were not here in Yellow Springs, and I'll get to that in just a second. But in those 45 sites, there were 836,000 visits to those sites along the Little Miami. So what does that mean for Yellow Springs? Go ahead. Well, Yellow Springs had a huge bulk of that. They had over 300,000, almost close to 301,000 trips to 17 sites along the river. Go ahead. Those sites, and you're wondering, okay, where were the 17 sites? Those sites included 9 parking lots in John Bryan, Glen Helen, Grinnell Mill, right here, the community center parking lot, and 2 other parking lots in the village, one at the foundation and one at Corey, your general parking lot at Corey Street. Now, why did we choose those? Well, they either had direct connection with the river itself or direct connection with the bike path. And if folks were coming to recreate here in Yellow Springs, these are the lots that they were going to use to have that recreation connection. Go ahead. We found that the months of May and June were the highest months used and the highest months visited those recreation sites. That's not uncommon. May, the kids are just starting to get out of school. June, they're out of school, and everybody wants that summer vacation before all the hot of summer hits. The northern part, oh, there we go. The northern part of the river, which is what you all reside in, includes all of John Bryan, Glen Helen, all of the Clifton Gorge area, had the largest number of visitation throughout our study. I hope that doesn't surprise any of you. You know, you have a lot of folks that like your community and they like to come here to recreate. Go ahead. The recreational impact value of the whole 43 miles of the river was $14.9 million per year. And I'm going to let Bill explain to you what that 14.9 million means and how they came up with that number.
Thank you, Cris. So annual recreational value is a function of 2 pieces. One is direct spending. And this is how these kind of studies had been done decade after decade after decade. We would go in to talk to elected or appointed officials and talk about value of these beautiful places. People would always want to talk about direct spending. How much should people spend on gas and potato chips and beer and worms and fishing equipment and kayaks? That's an example of direct spending. Ohio State was a leader a couple of decades ago in saying, hey, when we look at natural areas, you know, we got to be talking about more than direct spending. They're of greater value than that. So there is an economic principle called consumer surplus. And this is the value that the public puts on rivers, parks, recreational opportunity. So there's a little multi-billion-dollar company that most of us have never heard of called Qualtrics. And if you look at the bottom of any little survey you've taken, these are the people that have Cray computers and things like that that crunch all the demographic numbers of who lives in what zip code and what the average income is of people who live in zip codes like that. And what do they spend their money on, and how do they make their decisions where they're going to recreate? All of these things lead to the calculation of consumer surplus. So if you have an economics degree, which I don't, but consumer surplus is basically 2 lines. It's a supply and demand line crossing each other, and then you can calculate above that line where the consumer value is, and then below that line is where companies make more money selling goods and services. But anyway, the total recreational impact includes not only the direct spending, but also the consumer surplus. How do people value facilities like the Little Miami? And it's a real eye-opener when you look at it. So in our report, there's all the graphs and charts published by Ohio State. The report's available online, and I think the website's going to come up here in a minute, but
They have a copy of it.
all right, you got a copy of the report? So, I encourage everyone here in this room and people watching tonight to go to our website, Little Miami Watershed Network. You can click on the webinar that Ohio State produced to review and to launch this report after it was finished in March of this year. So the link to the webinar is on there. And of course, the whole report is on there. So maybe we'll have some discussion at the end. Hope you want to add something?
No, I want Chris to finish with the
Great,
slides.
thank you.
And Bill, I just want to say thank you. We have included that report in our council packet from a previous meeting, but it would also be great if Philip could highlight it with a link on our social media. Because, this is great stuff. And so Chris, you're going to give us a quick.
I'm going to give you a real quick.
Okay, good. All right.
So the recreational value for that total 43 miles is 14.9 million. Yellow Springs, because of the fact that you had the majority of the visitations, also had the majority of that recreational impact funds. You want to click me? 4,841,697. That's a lot of money coming into your community because of the river and the bike paths and the fact that folks like to recreate in your community. Go ahead. Across the 43 river miles, the study generated 346,500 per mile. So if you break down that 14.9 by 43, that's what it works out to be per mile. Go ahead. So why do we need this information? Because we have a lot of pressures on the river. We have a lot of things like trash and cleanup that we deal with, but you folks also have a lot of pressure on that river, and a lot of folks that think that the river doesn't necessarily need to be protected. And this information may help you to understand why it does. You can go ahead. From an economics value, obviously, it has proven itself, but also from a value of just being a beautiful place to live. Go ahead. And more than ever, somebody needs to speak for the river, and that's why we do what we do. Go ahead. Thank you. If you have any questions, I can help with that. There's information there on our website. You can get a hold of our executive director or Hope or Bill or myself, and we can answer those later for you. If the study doesn't make sense, I had to have somebody explain it to me because I am not a numbers person. So,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Mary Ann.
Well, first of all, thank you. I am a fan of your organization and have done some activities with it. I think that it's vital that people understand what the watershed, what a watershed is,
Yep.
why it's important, and we are in the Little Miami River watershed. And I'm so happy that it's in the name of your organization too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So why not ask the county for some American Rescue Plan dollars to invest in this? So, one of your slides said, you want our support, and we've, written letters before, but
support comes in many ways, Brian.
Yeah.
And support comes, yes, by funding, and yes, by letters of recommendation, but it also comes from decisions, I can say that word, that you will make.
Of course.
It comes from ways your community grows. It comes from things that happen around the community and throughout the county. So there's lots of ways to support us.
Okay. but let's make a grab at some dollars. So we've got county and state dollars still, and I'd be willing to talk to you guys about that because we're doing it for other stuff too. Love this. Thank you guys so much. And I know Mary Ann's been involved, and yeah, we really appreciate the connection. And you guys did a great job of making sure that visitors got that survey. I saw it everywhere. Okay. So thank you. Yes.
Super.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Protecting the river in any way you can, because what you all, decisions you all make have a lot to do with river pollution or whatever gets into the main river through the springs and through the lines of the day.
Yep.
Very important.
Yes.
Really important, and we appreciate you working with us on getting sure that zoning, local zoning is the key. I can't repeat that enough. Local zoning is the key. It's on your table out there.
Yeah, we should have you guys at the mic, I'll say, but luckily we've got Riley like right back there, and he's like capturing it all for the paper. So,
Local zoning is the key.
all right, we need to talk.
We would be happy to talk with your committees.
Thanks, Hope. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Chris. Very awesome.
And Brian, if I may, to thank you for all the work that you do. There are times where we make these incremental progress to ensure the health of the river. Most recently, we removed our oil collection container that was right at the edge of the glens, and so we knew we needed to remove that just to ensure the future of the river. So, things like that. They're small, but they go a long ways.
You're talking about from the old power plant, or
our oil collection?
Oh, okay.
We use oil collection that we had there at the near the pottery shop.
Sweet.
Also, all the stormwater work that we're doing
Correct.
and will be doing.
Yes.
All right. Well, what a great way to start off a meeting after a month off. Josue, I'd like you to talk, highlight Ben Sparks and any other announcements you have, and then I have a few.
Sure. It's been a while since we made the Ben Spark announcement. Ben Spark was inducted into the Hall of Fame with all the linemen that serve American Municipal Power and publicly owned utilities. So it's great to recognize the folks that are out when the weather hits and we have power outages. These folks are coming in the thick of the storm, ensuring that we can get our power lines up and running as soon as possible. So thanks to Ben and other linemen, not just on our team, but in our American Municipal Power Association.
Cool.
Then I've got a couple other exciting announcements, if I may.
Please.
We've got a Touch a Truck event on August 26th. That's 5 to 7.
So we're still doing the dunk tank?
The Paige is working on it. So we've had what Brian has referenced. We've had a request for a special exhibit to have a dump tank, and there was a request for a particular individual, and that individual has volunteered. So we're working on getting the dump tank for Touch a Truck. So, but this year it's getting a little bigger than it was last year, and we also wanted to accommodate the children, the smaller children, and being sensitive to the heat. So we moved it to a later hour. So it'll happen on August 26th, 5 to 7. So it'll be a little cooler. There's also more space at the high school, and Paige has been able to secure some great vehicles, including CareFlight will be
Good.
arriving on site, so they'll be flying in. So we expect a great event.
Awesome. Anything else?
No, good.
Okay. Marianne, did you have an announcement? Okay. All right, so I have a few things I'll run through. Okay, well, actually, block parties.
Oh, yes. On block parties, we released the process for applying for the block party. So there's a form on our website that folks can go and fill out, and they can request the roadblocks for the block party. And we're also bringing back the gift card for paper goods and products to support the block parties. So that form is on our website. I know Mayor Pam wrote a letter in the YS News outlining the process.
And we decided on $25.
$25 at Toms.
Vouchers for Toms.
For Toms, correct.
Just for transparency, when we had block parties prior to COVID, we had 35. So 25 times 35. So the village is sponsoring a bit under 1,000 to help those.
That's a total of $875.
There you go. Okay. All right. Cris Moocher, our Regional Steward Award winner. We wanted to congratulate him. There was an event not only at the last township meeting, but also down at MVRPC. We were at Riverscape. That was really nice to see. Carbon reduction. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about elected bodies later. I wanted to specifically thank Judith Hempfling for taking the lead on the Yellow Springs Schools beautification event. And one thing that I think we can learn from this, and we're going to talk about our joint meeting with the other elected bodies later, is, we talk so much about how we could redirect energy towards actually doing really cool things in our community. And that's really what I felt at this event. So there were a couple dozen people at Mills Lawn, a couple dozen people at the high school, very positive. I saw Mitzi sent some pictures. She and Richard Zoff were out later trying to work on the sidewalks even further. It's amazing once you get started how much work there is. But it was really nice, and we've talked about this with active transportation and cleaning our own sidewalks and whatnot, but Judith Hempfling made the effort to make something like this happen, and it was successful, and we should bounce off of that.
Say what it was.
Yeah, the YS Schools re-beautification effort.
Was it at Mills Lawn?
Mills Lawn and at the high school. Yes, yes.
And the village was well represented.
Oh, yes, and that's the other thing I wanted to thank is Josue jumped in. You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I was thinking you too. We were out there on our knees pulling out weeds.
But you also brought the truck in.
Yes,
so.
brought in the dump truck to take care of take the weeds and branches and a few other things off-site to our dump station at the village. Well, it's our brush pile and compost. Mm-hmm. So we helped with whatever we could that day.
Yes, and that will relate to, it's in the manager's report that we've got all this great mulch for villagers to take advantage of, and we did it this year. We're going to do it next year. I didn't really understand the mulch thing when we did it this year, but now I get that we're chipping wood, and I think that's great. Yeah, really nice. So the last thing I wanted to mention is also Mitzi, and even though I'm saying this, you can still come up at citizen concerns. So Mitzi had several council members. I know Mayor Pam was also involved in having a different perspective on the accessibility of our sidewalks. And I'll say, first of all, if I had to use a self-assisted mobility device, I would need to work out big time because I could barely navigate the wheelchair in the beginning. But it was amazing because we were serious. Mitzi picked different spots for folks, but for me, it was right at the schools that afternoon after I had been digging out the sidewalks. And yeah, we have a lot of challenges. And so, I'm going to say related to that, I'm supportive of stepping up our efforts around enforcement. And so I guess I'm preempting Mitzi a little bit, but I did want to say that I appreciated other council members that did that. I know Gavin was the first council member to do that, and your upper arm strength is probably a little bit better than mine, but anyway, it was it definitely opened my mind. So with that, any other announcements? Okay, so then I think we're going to move into our consent agenda. And we've got 2 items. Judy, let's go ahead and read in the first item.
That would be the minutes of July 18th, regular session.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Was there a second?
Second.
Yes.
Okay, all right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. Yeah, I was realizing I was looking for Scott Fife, and I do not see him. He had an announcement as well. All right. Yeah.
I'd like to say something about the addition of the credit card statement, which
Yes. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and like bring it in and then, okay. So the second item is the credit card transactions. Can I get a motion?
I'm sorry. I thought we were doing both.
Remember, we have to bring everything off the agenda item.
Is that your motion?
Yes. Are we so moved?
I move.
Second.
Okay. And then comments? Yes.
Yeah. I don't think as a council member, it's very meaningful to approve it without knowing what the expenses were for. And I don't know how difficult that would be to have that line item. But, and I'm not asking for that feedback right now, but otherwise it's meaningless, I think. So.
Okay. Any other? I mean, again, I was just kind of pausing because I was thinking about the other bodies that I know that do what I feel like is well, anyway, that approve the credit card statements. Greene County and MVRPC. I'm trying to remember like what the description lines look like. I think the county doesn't have a description line, MVRPC might. So how hard would that be to do?
Well, I guess I'm just asking that you look into it and see how, if it's like hugely cumbersome, then, okay. But if it's not that difficult, I think it would be helpful. Then we know, what's being purchased. Otherwise, we just have this list of places
Right,
and amounts.
some are easier than others, like the Office Max. I think there were 3 sets of pens or 3 different types of sets of pens. So itemizing what all those things are can be very cumbersome. I'd like to take a step back and just provide some context on why this is coming to you now. Council adopted a credit card policy, and that policy that the previous solicitor and the finance director at the time, they put together this requirement within the policy to bring this to council. So we're following up with the result of that policy. So I wanted to give that context to the public. We want to provide meaningful information to council on what's happening. I think most of the transactions will speak to themselves, like the Office Max, the Menards or the Lowe's. There's several that are just vendors that we regularly procure things from. There might be different size bolts, different times, but they're generally routine maintenance things. I am happy to provide you with any information if you have any questions about particular transactions. So like if one sticks out in general, like you see they're generally small transactions that in this month they added up, in July they added up to 5,700, and in August they add up to $6,395. So they trend very similar to month. So I'm sorry, Marianne, I don't have another more comprehensive response, but I'm happy to provide information if you have any questions on a particular transaction.
And I will say, just for further context, for MVRPC, the only person that ever asked about the credit card statements was Cris Moocher, probably why he got the Regional Steward Award. And I'm joking. And I've never heard any questions when I've gone to Greene County Commission. But that being said, I'd like to see what their reports look like, and if there's a way that we can, even if it's just like routine maintenance or something, And I think that's good. So, okay, any other discussion before we vote to approve? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, what? Okay.
It's a consent agenda, so if you could just go ahead and vote, and then if there are comments, you can take them at a different time, because this is not really.
You know, actually, I'm willing to take a comment. Just because since it's the first time, so let's go ahead and hear it, Riley.
Yeah, Riley Dixon, Yellow Springs News. While I appreciate this being on the agenda, I tend to agree with Mary Ann. AMZN, obviously Amazon, that's such a broad marketplace where anything could have been purchased for $600+. So while this exists, I think in the interest of transparency, at least, you know, selfishly for the Yellow Springs News, who purports to communicate things to the public, I think having a greater a more detailed itemized list of what those $600 went to specifically on Amazon would be pretty useful, because anything can be purchased on Amazon. So, you know, that line item isn't as useful as, you know, perhaps a more detailed receipt. So,
okay, we got it. And I'll just say, actually, all right, hold on, John. I didn't ask for like another comment yet. And yeah, actually, I mean, part of why I wanted to entertain comments is because we have state auditors that take care of this. The township doesn't do anything like this. This is like over the top. And so, you know, we're happy to fill it out, but the reality is we've got like plenty of checks and balances in place, including a budget that we approve. So John, if you got something really quick, but I did not expect to like go this route.
So I'm aware that the village probably also has requisitions that correspond to probably each of those credit card transactions.
Yes.
So if you just matched those requisition descriptions, added a field for the requisitions to match those credit card transactions, that really would provide a lot of detail, although it wouldn't be to the level of detail to tell you exactly which items were purchased. You would know for what purpose the purchase was made.
All right, thanks, John Hempfling. Okay, so with that, yes, Mary Ann McQueen.
I did not raise this because I was questioning the purchase, but it's like once we see, before, who knew? You know, who knew? And now I see, oh, Amazon. So I think that it would be helpful to understand what the village is purchasing. So it's more about educating me as a council person on what's being purchased. It's not like.
Thanks for that follow-up.
Nefarious intent or anything.
That's a great comment. And again, I'm glad we discussed this because it's the first time that it's been on the agenda. And it honestly, yeah, I mean, we had talked about this way back when I saw that other bodies like did a perfunctory kind of check. And so we'll continue to be as transparent as we can be. So with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we are into review of the agenda. One thing I want to do is move resolution 2022-50 to the top. And then we are going to, or I guess I'm going to swear in Amelia Blankenship. Yes. And then we'll move on from there. Anything else?
Yeah, we need to add an emergency reading of Ordinance 2022-30, which you have at your place.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes.
Yes.
I would like to have time under old business. Carmen and I would like to have time under old business to briefly discuss the recommendations from the Environmental Commission and get some council input.
So this is about Ellis Pond.
Yeah.
So
we're making that request because we think that if there's things that some of the things that may be done on Ellis Pond are short-term, some of the things are long-term, but it impacts what Environmental Commission is going to be focusing on.
So I love the recommendations. Why don't we keep it in the context of the manager's report? I don't think it needs to be a separate item. So,
Okay.
because I have some thoughts as well, but I think the bottom line is probably there needs to be a little bit of time to absorb, and I don't think we're going to take any immediate actions. But yeah, so manager's report, we'll do it. Yep.
And the other comment is that this agenda is not timed. I guess maybe that was, I don't know, was that?
I can stop timing it until
You guys follow your times. That is my little statement about the times on the.
Well, we did a good job last meeting.
We did. We're
And
seeing-
so I think
seeing how it goes now.
if we do a good job at this meeting, then maybe Judy will allow us to put times on
This
it
is your
again.
spanking. I
But-
mean,
Right.
but-
really, they had no bearing on reality.
But that being said, yes, I mean, we should never need to have more than a 2.5-hour meeting, and we should get down to 2 hours. So,
But I think the way that we do, and
Yes.
this isn't about Judy, this is about council.
yeah, we're kind of, I'm kind of
which isn't
joking, but yes. But
I think that if, and council, we haven't been doing a good job. We haven't been doing it at all, in fact. But if we have times that we think are reasonable, and if we have someone who's assigned timekeeper, which I think should be the vice president, but we all should be doing it. And if you don't want to do it, Kevin, I'll do it. We come up to a time limit and we say, okay, this is what we've allotted. Do we want to continue or not? I mean, it doesn't mean that we have to absolutely keep it at that time, but it means that we're being intentional.
Yes,
And I think
good
that's
point.
important.
I just want to add something really quickly. So there are people that watch, that are, they look at the agenda, and although it's not followed, they depend on that time frame to determine when they're going to watch. And so it's important that it's added, or
yes.
that it's back there, because this is, although it's inconvenient for us, it needs to be back in there. That's
Yeah.
just my opinion.
I totally agree with all of that, and I think we did a good job at the last meeting, and we'll do a good job today, and we'll get those times back on there. All right, cool.
I'll just, since that was referenced, I'll go ahead and say that, yes, if we as a body agree that we want to put the times back on there, I mean, I'll take responsibility for being timekeeper number 2. And I also agree with Carmen, whereas I've known folks that were coming to the meetings, or as she alluded to, showing up either virtually or in person at a meeting, they sometimes do look for that time for the item that they're interested in. So I think it's helpful on the front end if we do our job on the back end.
Yeah, there's lots of aspects to it, and and ultimately, we've got to also balance the fact that we want to make sure that citizens can comment, but we can definitely do a better job. And that's a great segue to petitions and communications. Kevin Stokes.
All right, thank you very much. The council clerk has received a letter from councilpersons Housh and DeVore Leonard regarding support for the Yellow Springs Universal Basic Income Project. Pan Reich has a letter regarding COVID restrictions, suggesting that COVID restrictions are needed. Rebecca Kuder suggesting that masking should be required at the street fair. Greene County Public Health Department regarding a harm reduction workshop. The mayor's clerk offered 2 iterations of the mayor's monthly reports. Neighbors for Neighbors submitted a letter regarding proposed zoning reforms, and Councilman Housh has a letter in reference to the CNN report on new COVID guidelines. And that's what we have at this point in petitions and communications. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So I guess actually that does remind me, so are we going to talk about COVID in your manager's report, or?
I have
Okay.
discussed in the manager's report.
Okay. And then I think the second thing is, I do want to highlight that with the meetings around some of the maybe low-hanging fruit with zoning. There's a plan to have, if council is open, that group present on what I understood was a positive meeting with Josue and Denise at the next meeting. So I'm seeing general nods that would be good. Yes, September 6th. And related to that, since I know Johnny Burns is online, you're up there. See? Yes. All right, man. You're everywhere. Johnny Burns. So one of the things that's highlighted in those recommendations is infill, which of course we've talked about and we want, but we understand that that's a big challenge for our infrastructure. So I want you to be prepared to speak to that, because this meeting will be about council hearing these ideas and then directing our planning commission to review it, which is why we have a planning commission. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that. Okay. So I think we're going to do resolution 2022-50, and Judy, let's read that in full since we have Amy Blankenship here.
All right. Oops. I just put it in the totally wrong spot. Sorry. Thanks. This is appointing Amelia N. Blankenship, Esquire, Frostbound Todd, as village solicitor for a term of up to 2 years and fixing compensation. Whereas pursuant to Section 79 of the village charter, the village solicitor serves at the pleasure of council in accordance with the village charter. And whereas after a thorough review and selection process and interviews of several qualified candidates, Village Council now desires to appoint Amy Blankenship of Frost Brown Todd to serve as village solicitor. Now therefore, Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that, Section 1, Amy Blankenship of Frost Brown Todd is appointed to serve as solicitor for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, to perform such duties as provided for in the charter and more specifically set forth in the legal services agreement incorporated as attachment A to this resolution. Section 2, the village solicitor shall be paid for ordinary and extraordinary services as provided in attachment A, subject to annual budgetary review. Section 3, the president of council for the village of Yellow Springs is hereby authorized to execute the attached legal services agreement. Section 4, this resolution shall take effect August 15th, 2022, and the village solicitor shall serve on an at-will basis through August 15th, 2024. Upon expiration of the term, council has full discretion to choose to renew or renegotiate terms.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
Okay. All those any discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
I actually had a number of questions. So one of my questions involves the distinction between routine services and non-routine, because if it's non-routine, we have to pay extra for it. So I'd like to get a better understanding of what might be non-routine. And one particular question is, would all questions from the police department be considered routine, or would some be non-routine? So that's one question. The other is, and this is maybe more for council than for our solicitor, if a council member is working on a project, or two council members are working on a project, and we need legal advice, how we do that, and is that what determines whether it's routine or non-routine? And then the last question involves, if the firm, whatever the name of it.
Brown Todd.
Yes, if that firm is representing either an adversary of the village, I mean, in a different legal capacity. Well, I wasn't quite sure about what the boundaries were in that case for the firm to be representing someone that the village might have a legally adversarial relationship with.
I'm happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, sure, please.
Thank you for asking those questions. And I appreciate the opportunity to address that right out of the gate, because that non-routine, routine services is a conversation that the manager and I are going to be having a lot. I'm sure you've heard the term retainer, right? And so the retainer services are the routine services. It's just termed differently in the contract. And that will include, well, most of what we did for the last couple of days, all of the legislation, preparation for the meeting, review of different routine documents, drafting of legislation, phone calls, public records reviews, things like that. What's set forth in there as non-retainer or non-routine would be litigation. If the village is actively engaged in litigation, that will be rolled out of the retainer or considered a non-routine service, and then that is billed hourly. Other examples of that are projects that take on, isolated projects that take on many, many hours of time. Then those isolated projects, upon conversation with the manager, will also be rolled out of the retainer under the contract. I see absolutely no reason why police issues would automatically need to be non-routine. As a matter of fact, in a perfect world, most of them are retainer routine services, right? So no, I would not by any means automatically assume that if it's a police matter, that it needs to be rolled out of the retainer. Does that answer your questions?
That answers that. And one, so I think it included that you would attend one council meeting a month. What if we think, well, we don't need you this month, but maybe the next month we need you at both meetings? I mean, is there flexibility about that?
There's always, the manager and I can always be having those conversations. Absolutely.
Cool. So then, but the other question was around.
Conflict checks.
Yes.
So we have as a firm a very robust conflict check process. When new work comes into the firm, it gets run through conflicts. We have a team of conflict attorneys. That's all they do. Their full-time job is to run those conflicts. Let's say someone was to represent an entity that thought they might be adverse to the Village of Yellow Springs. When that attorney, wherever they may be in the firm, fills out that form, one of the potential adverse parties they would list would be the village. It would then pop when the conflict check was run as a client of the firm. Then I get contacted, that attorney would be contacted, hey, we have a possible conflict, let's talk through the details here. And then it's determined whether a conflict exists or not. We take it pretty seriously, and certainly work does have to go right back out the door if there's a conflict that can't be waived or addressed in some way.
And the last question, which I think was maybe internal council question, was if, say, one or two council members are working on a particular project, have we said that we're going to go through the council president?
We need to manage our legal services. And so we do have, and we should pull that up, we have a policy about, like, you know, how council engages our, you know, village solicitor. So we can pull that up. But it does, I mean, it should, for the most part, happen right here, you know? So again, like, if we all agree that something should be pursued, then, or a majority of us agree, then that's the main direction. So I would just say, like, it should just be a public process, really. So, and then I guess it would be a question of whether it's routine or not routine. So I get, you know, like when we did vote 16, I would consider that to be non-routine. You know, that's not in the regular business of the village. But I don't know, you might disagree.
Well, and if it was an isolated project that took on more than 10 hours of attorney time, then yes.
Okay.
Please, I will have an eye towards managing this retainer. We've had several conversations about it already, managing things that are billed as non-routine services. I've had the opportunity to work for the village before in years past at another firm. So I am, I think I am starting from a place of understanding where we would be able to manage that issue and try and keep those legal expenses under control.
Yeah, and I think that's and that's a good thing. I think that ultimately we don't need to dance around is, we're jumping up a little bit in our, legal expenses for good reasons, I think. And I think that's also why those of us that have worked with you trust that you are thinking about that.
Yes,
so.
Thank you. I take it as a great vote of confidence, and I will deliver the service that it deserves.
Gavin.
Would it be, okay, Judy, would you mind circulating the information to all council about the
process by which we communicate with solicitor. Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, thanks, Amy. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a roll call on this one, Judy.
DeVore Leonard,
Yes?
McQueen,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and so now I'm gonna break out and I'm gonna have Amy come back up.
It's gonna get in the good side, right?
If there is a camera,
Yeah, right.
this is not unusual. Okay, so raise our right hands and repeat after me. I solemnly swear
I solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and will obey the laws of the United States
and will obey the laws of the United States
and the state of Ohio,
and the state of Ohio,
that I will in all respects
that I will in all respects
observe the provisions of the Charter
observe the provisions of the Charter
and ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs,
and the ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Village Solicitor.
the duties of the office of Village Solicitor.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Council.
And also have one pockets.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You might have the old one, so.
Appreciate that.
By the way, Vince, you all out in the crowd. I want you to make sure you have one too. Yes. See? That's right. Make sure duty is official. Okay, so we're gonna hop back up to, I think it's ordinance 2229. Judy, we can read that in by title only.
All right, this is approving a use policy for municipal broadband known as SpringsNet for the Village of Yellow Springs.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right, so this is a second reading, so we're going to open the public hearing. I do see that we've got Ellis, Timothy, anyone else that we want to ask questions. Josue, do you want to say anything?
Sure, yes, of course. Thank you, Council. Heard the presentation from Ellis Jacob. We've gone through this use policy. I think we've got the most robust privacy policy and anti-surveillance or surveillance use policy before you. So we did a presentation. We're happy to talk through the details again. We've invited Alice Jacobs and Timothy to provide two types of representation. Alice has been working on the legal side of the use policy, and Timothy has been working on the technical side of the policy. So you have the folks that you need to answer the questions as you vote for the second time on this legislation.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll just say as a side note, Scott was planning to update us on the home visits that have been happening. So things are moving. One day we will all be able to have high quality, cheaper internet services. But yeah, with that, any questions or comments from council?
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I love, that's all we need to say, right? Yeah. Gavin, were you going to say anything? Okay, yeah, I mean, this is amazing. Ellis, Tim, you guys don't really have to say anything. I mean, the work that has been done has been, yeah, we do have the most robust policy in the world. So just copy Yellow Springs. So with that, any questions or comments from citizens? Mark Housh, to the mic.
I just want to thank council and all of the citizens that were involved in this project and its work. It's been an amazing amount of work. I know it's been decades coming. On behalf of the business community, we really appreciate that. I do want to let you know that the Chamber will be having an open event for all businesses that will be chaired by Thor Sage to discuss the broadband project and to help to further it, at least in the pilot area. So we really do appreciate it. And I for one, am thinking this is absolutely a no-brainer. this, from a business standpoint, this is absolutely a no-brainer, and we're going to try and do our best to quell some of the questions, answer some of the questions, and smooth it for the other businesses.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, appreciate it. Let us know if it makes sense for us to promote that event that you mentioned.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Yes, thank you, Mark Heiss. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. And Judy, if we could call the roll.
Yes. Brown.
Yes.
DeVore Leonard.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got Resolution 2022-51. We can do by title only.
Oh, we've actually got our emergency ordinance added to the agenda. If
Oh, you want that to happen next?
you don't mind, just, well,
So that's the 2022-30, I get you.
Got it.
Okay, so yes, let's read in Emergency Ordinance 2022-30 by title only.
all right. This is authorizing the Village of Yellow Springs to execute a mutual aid agreement with Municipal Energy Services Agency and declaring an emergency.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So Judy, explain why we do emergencies, just because we haven't done that in a while.
We do emergencies when there is an urgent need to enact something prior to the 30-day waiting period that needs to come into play if you do not read an ordinance as an emergency. And I know Johnny Burns is here to explain the nature of that emergency.
Okay, and we never do this if it's some kind of major shift in policy. These are like nuts and bolts kinds of things. So Johnny Burns.
Okay, let me first explain what the reasoning for it being an emergency is we have lost a lineman. His last day was 2 weeks ago. We have another lineman that's on vacation in Florida, so that leaves us down to Ben Sparks and Jeff Horn, and then myself coming out in the evening. So we reached out to AMP. AMP has a circuit rider that they have a couple linemen available. They actually work for AMP. We have to sign a service agreement with them, and therefore it requires action from the council. These are qualified journeyman linemen that actually work for them. They actually come with their own vehicle. They can do the work for themselves. They can help us do it. So if we have a major problem that we need help, we can call them. They can come right down and help us. They are journeyman lineman. So
All right,
that's the reason why it's an emergency.
great. Questions, comments? Okay, so I think I should open a public hearing since it's an emergency reading. Any questions or comments from citizens? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Where can I read this?
Up here.
You can
Where can I read this ordinance online?
Oh.
read it in the paper. Once you guys print it, I sent it to you. And you can read it online after tonight, because I'll get it up as legislation. Yep.
All right, cool.
Brian, I just want to.
Yeah.
We have a small but mighty team, and Johnny may not want me to say this, but Friday, Johnny and I to handle a power outage call on Friday. That's how responsive we want to be to our constituency, where, we want to make sure we get in the job done as fast as possible with the right team. So this is another tool in the toolbox of being prepared for all kinds of calls.
Did you wear your overalls?
Actually, I had my suit minus the tie, but we got the power up and running.
Nice. Thank you, guys. Okay, let's call the roll.
All right. McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
DeVore Leonard.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we will do Resolution 2022-51. Title only is great.
This is authorizing expenditure for outside counsel for Citizen Review Board proposal for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right, I think we had a lengthy discussion at our last meeting, so Josue, anything to update? I will say I appreciated the conciseness of the scope of work. I thought that was very clear. Go ahead.
Yeah, this formalizes, and we're coming back with the task or the items that council requested. So there's that resolution and there's that concise scope of work. There's one thing I would state about the scope of work is that it makes reference to the proposal being drafted by the Citizen Review Board Subcommittee, it should say, the 365 work group. I apologize to the 365 group and their work on it. I didn't want to undermine the work, so I want to make that note that the Citizen Review Board Subcommittee is the work group for the 365 project. Yep. And Carmen, I don't know if I missed anything.
No, it was 365, and there were, I mean, obviously other citizens and groups involved, one of which was human. But that's, yeah, that's, we all know who did things. It's good.
Cool. Well,
are there any questions on the scope of work?
Well, and also to just like, yeah, I guess specifically any like things that need to be added to the final?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, it looks good.
Cool. Okay. All right. So good. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Then let's go ahead and do a roll call.
All right. Brown.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
DeVore Leonard.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. 2022-52. Title only, please.
This is approving a 2-month extension of the existing contract with Rumpke Waste Services.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
What's what?
Thank you. We are our solid waste contract is up for renewal, another renewal term. Given that we've had to transition with Solicitor, we want to bring this 2-month extension to council so that it gives us more time for us to finalize any agreement with either Rumpke or any other provider. So I'll be meeting with Amy. Amy's hit the ground running before she was even on the ground. So I want to give her a little room, and then we'll re-engage in the conversations about the solid waste contract. What I will state that about the contract is, there's really only one recycling provider in the area, and that's Rumpke. So anyone that we work with will still have to have a relationship with Rumpke on the recycling, and that is the nature of the environment that we're operating in. Rumpke has done a really good job at building up capacity to handle recycling, and recycling is a key product or service of our solid waste services to our community. We are the top recycling community for our county. If you look at the county solid waste report that came to council, I believe, last year, we're doing really great things with our solid waste management plan. So we're able to do such great things because we have a great partnership. And but we'll have those conversations with Rumpke and other providers as we need to secure the next contract for the village. Yes.
I recall, I think last time we did the contract, you had suggested adding a small fee to include some
educational services and other pilot programs.
Are you thinking about, I would support doing that.
Yes, I would love to. My goal 2 years ago was looking at ways of reducing our overall landfill waste. We've done a great job at increasing our recycling numbers, but over the last 2 years, we've seen astonishing reports about how much actually gets recycled, and a lot of it, what gets recycled is dependent, is there an economic opportunity for somebody to buy the recyclables and do something with it? We learned that there were countries that stopped taking the United States waste, and so that meant that a lot of recycling material was ending up in landfill, so folks were being misled as to their trash being recycled when it wasn't. So I think the whole goal from a climate sustainability perspective is to overall reduce our solid waste disposal. And 2 years ago, I proposed a small percentage increase to the rate so that we can invest in educational campaigns and invest in creative and innovative new strategies to remove products out of the solid waste stream. You may ask, how could we do this? We have a great regenerative soil practices nonprofit organization just right at the edge of town, and actually their office are in town, so they are in Yellow Springs, that they are trying really unique things to get compost onto communities, get residents composting on their sites. And so there are things, and there are things that we can do, and there are partners in our community that we can strengthen our relationship to find ways of reducing our solid waste disposal.
Thank you.
Okay. You know, I will also underscore the fact that we have limited choices means that the kinds of things we can recycle are also limited, which, you know, we can't resolve that, but I think we are using the best choice, so, yeah. Okay. All right, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. 2022-53, we can do that by title only.
All right, this is authorizing the village manager to enter into an agreement with Fillmore Construction LLC for 2022 road resurfacing in the village.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Josue?
Thank you, Brian. I've included some of this information in our report, and Johnny has joined me today to talk about this. And as much depth as you want to get into it, we talk resurfacing all the time. In short, we're looking to resurface several roads in the village. The resolution allows us to do that. Johnny, do you want to get into the details of the roads?
Yeah, and I'm going to recommend resurfacing means stay on the surface. So yes.
Probably the one that we need to talk about most is Herman Street at right there before High. It's right next to the Pelzel property. A lot of people think it's all the heavy trucks and stuff, but it's actually not. There is no base, it's laying straight on the dirt. So that is, we're going to dig down and we're going to put a bigger base down, and we'll probably keep it an inch low, see how it does, and then either we'll do it again or we'll cap it at the end of the next year. And then Allen Street will be done from 68, it'll be ground down and resurfaced from 68 to Livermore. If you notice, there's a big crack right down the middle of it, and the sides are going away as well. And the other one is from 68 West South College to South High Street, which will butt up to that intersection at the Pelzel, right there where the new house is.
So is this part of the grant that we're going after, or this is just what we've already funded? What we've already set aside? Okay.
These are things that are in our plans to resurface and
Right.
stay.
We chose not to go with the Greene County bid, and we chose to go out on our own so we can get a smaller amount.
South College Street will pair well with the work that we've done with the multimodal path there.
Correct.
Okay. Questions? All right.
Thank you,
Thanks, Johnny. Okay. If there's nothing else, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So I think we've got 2022-54, title only.
This is authorizing the village manager to apply to the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services for a grant to purchase body-worn cameras and equipment for the Yellow Springs Police Department.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Paige, are you talking about this, or are you starting?
This is
Or
a couple of us. This is the second time we're coming to council for this grant application. The first time, we had a really good opportunity to secure newly available funding for body-worn cameras, but we were putting the cart before the horse, and we were pursuing grant funding without having a use policy. So that was last October. From October through March, April, we work with Ellis Jacobs, John Henflin, Bomani, Joan Chappelle. Am I leaving anybody, John? Obviously Paige, myself. We put together what I believe is the best body-worn camera policy that exists in the country. We looked at the best models, UCLA, we looked at these national models, and we've improved upon it. We had extensive conversations with council. We presented, I believe, twice on the body-worn use policy, and so now we're coming to you and asking you for authorization for us to pursue funding through the OCJS for body-worn cameras. This will cover 11 cameras for officers. The dollars will also go towards training and capacity building for the organization. It's a 5-year reimbursable grant, so it means that we have to spend the money and we'll get reimbursed. And over the 5-year period, the grant funding phases out. What will be the ongoing cost for the village, which is something that we will need to consider, as the personnel expense of supporting the technology. That means having somebody redact the video and make those public records available. So there will be an ongoing expense for us. But I think our community has been clear about accountability and making as much video available as possible. So we have weighed the interest of the public while also considering all the privacy concerns of our residents, those that are experiencing mental health episodes or medical emergencies and a variety of other incidents. So it strikes a good balance between the making public records available while also ensuring the privacy of our residents. Oh, did I miss anything, Paige?
Absolutely not. I'm happy to field any questions about specific equipment or anything like that.
Well, do you want to hop up and talk a little bit about why the bump in the ask?
So the last quote that we received regarding the equipment that we initially were interested in was back in, I want to say, late March, early April. So we were trying to hold off until getting a new quote until we were ready to actually submit for the grant so that we weren't kind of putting all these unnecessary pressures on the company. So accounting for about 9.5% inflation, that brings the camera total up to just shy of $76,000, and that's before personnel costs. That would include obviously the additional hours for our custodian of records, who's going to be handling all of the body-worn camera redaction, records request. He'll also be handling all of the implementation, whether it be the physical equipment or the actual training of the officers and some of the dispatchers for the actual equipment use. So accounting for personnel costs, training, implementation, and equipment itself with inflation, that's why we had to see the necessary increase.
Is there a match for this grant?
No.
And they pay for the first year of operations, and then we have to like deal with it after that?
It's a step-down grant is what it is. And forgive me, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe the first year is 100, and then it steps down to 75, 50, 25, and 25, if I'm not mistaken.
Interesting. Yeah, Gavin.
So do we know what the cost is after, like Josue, you were talking about there'd be additional like cost after the payment runs out?
Yes, we're getting creative with the budgeting. So it's a 5-year grant program. We're going to be working over the next couple of weeks to align the budget where the allowable expenses are allocated. So it's a step down. So they're reducing the grant year to year. So there are ways that we can ensure that we're covering the eligible expenses according to the period. So in short, whatever we can front load to the expense, while it's 100 or 75% eligible expense, we're gonna put those hard costs in there. And what we'll end up probably absorbing more over the period is the additional personnel hours of having to redact the video and manage those records. So in short, the equipment and some of the hard costs, we want to put that in year 1 and year 2. And then the other, as we stepping down for the grant, is going to be the cost that it's the ongoing cost.
Do you have any idea what the ongoing cost is? I understand the conceptual, I'm just trying to get, is this like $1,000 a year, $100,000 a year, just any ballpark?
We're talking about will be the ongoing personnel expense. Paige and I have started to have this conversation around moving our property manager or having the property manager person who's now part-time taking on more of that responsibility, and then we're doing the cost estimating as to what that additional increase in cost would be.
I mean, so the ongoing costs are the redactor and, you know, I guess who's like an archive, if that's the same person.
Sure, yeah. So
And then, yeah.
he would be considered the custodian of records, which would mean that not only does he handle the redacting, he'd also handle any of the, like, so let's say there's any issues with the software that maintains all the video. He would be the one that would liaison between the company and working out any technical issues, as well as any type of request that might come for court cases or whatever that may include.
And then our software costs might go up a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Just one other question. So will the social worker have a body worn camera or just the officers?
So at this time, we've only planned to outfit our officers with body-worn camera. And the reason for that would be because if a social worker were to respond to a call, they would be with an officer. So the officer would be outfitted with the camera as well as the in-car camera. However, that's not totally out of the question if that's something that we see is necessary, or if, you know, there are instances that arise where we find that the social worker's going to be engaging more with the public. That's not something we can totally take off the table, I don't believe. So.
Yeah, I think we're not contemplating the social worker having a body worn camera. Any changes to that, we have to evaluate it with the use policy. I think the intent of the use policy is to preserve as much privacy as possible on individuals that are experiencing what could be the worst time in their life. And I think that that's when our outreach specialist or social worker is responding to, she's responding more to those type of calls versus our officers who may be more traffic stop or 911 initiated calls.
Okay. Any other questions? Paige, awesome, thank you. Questions or comments from citizens? I mean, I think this is kind of a different, one. All right. I'm excited. I'm glad we are tracking these grant opportunities, and all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So I believe we have one more piece of legislation, 2022-55.
By title only?
Yes.
All right, this is authorizing the village manager to take all necessary steps to acquire real estate located at 545 Dayton Street and lengthy parcel ID number.
I did say title. I'm just kidding.
Here we go.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. We're asking council to allow us to secure this property. We identify this parcel as a key property to what is already existing village infrastructure. It abuts our Bill Duncan Park. It also abuts what will be a key active transportation project for us in 2 years. And so we want to, we have the opportunity to secure what is a 0.57 acre parcel at what I think it's a very good price. It'll allow us to protect current assets, allow us to have a smoother transition in two key projects coming up, which is the active transportation project is $1.2 million along Dayton Street, redo the multimodal path, and our sidewalk project. If you recall, our sidewalk project, which we started doing the tree trimming last week, runs along Limestone, and it cuts right across Bill Duncan, so it passes this property. So I think at the current time, it's prudent to acquire this parcel, and we can figure out what council envisions for the property down the road.
Questions? So how does it affect the community gardens?
It should not, because the community gardens are on current Bill Duncan property. So those will continue as they are. We actually have enhanced the community garden project with Marianne. We worked on having a neighborhood gardens coordinator that has been enrolling folks and providing some technical assistance. So that will continue to flourish as it has over the last couple months.
Marianne, go ahead.
If council wanted to expand the gardens, then that's an opportunity, but I think for what's existing now, that will be preserved. There would not affect current operations at Bill Duncan Park.
So Marianne, did you want to ask a little bit more about the ideas for the property, or?
I don't know.
Okay. I mean,
I wasn't, I mean, we're taking cash and investing it, first of all. So it's not an expense, it's an expense, but it's also an investment. I mean, I am concerned about what we do with it, and I would like to see us develop a plan on how to utilize that property sooner than later, but not at this meeting tonight.
And if I may, because you brought up the cash and the investment topic, we sold our 5.2 acres on July 29th to Cresco, and the sale price of that was $273,000 minus transaction cost that we had. Our net proceeds was $267,000. So from a cash perspective, we have some funds coming in, so it would not deplete our current cash reserves. So we anticipate that our cash reserves will remain as they are or increase at the end of the year because of this sale that yielded over $200,000 in proceeds. So from a cash perspective, we're not depleting our reserves. We have some money coming in. At the next council meeting, I will work on an adjusted estimated resources so we can send that to the county. And if you approve this tonight, I will bring back a supplemental to allow us to spend that money and have that money available for closing.
So, are we thinking about affordable housing?
I think the options are plentiful here. This is a property, 5.7 acres, that has access from two main roads. It has access from Dayton Road, and it has access from Limestone. It abuts both residential B and residential C, so opportunities, if council wants to explore opportunities, there are several options there. There is an administrative correction that we need to do in the parcel, and that is how the zoning overlay currently exists. Somehow in how our zoning map was created, we accidentally included this as part of Bill Duncan's conservation layer, but that's just an administrative error that we'll correct. If we acquire the property, we'll correct that administratively, and you'll also see that. But in terms of what zoning is possible there, it abuts both residential RB and RC, which is our most dense zoning districts.
Mitzi?
I'm just wondering, has the homeowner put any restrictions on the sale as to what the property can be used for, like affordable housing?
Has the seller put any restrictions?
Yeah.
No.
Is there any clause or anything in there?
No, there isn't. This is a simple sale, so there wouldn't be any covenant that will restrict council from.
Okay, so that property could be used for affordable housing?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Johnny, did I miss something?
Yep.
I just want to highlight something. Marianne says we need to get a plan together. I want to squash that. We need to hold off until 24. Because the main reason why we're trying to secure this property is it will mess up the grants on both sides, because we have a project on one side, we have another one, and when it transfers hands, if we change anything, the project gets delayed by 6-7 months. So we need to hold off on this property, get it, secure it, but hold off until both projects are completed.
You're talking about the safe routes to school?
Correct, and the Limestone Street and the multimodal path.
Okay, yep. Thanks, Johnny. Okay, yeah.
I will say that planning, especially if it's for development, takes years. So I don't think there's any problem. Unfortunately.
We know very well.
Unless we're going to have a trailer park.
Yep. Gavin? Oh, okay. All right, anything else? All right, well, yeah, I mean, this is a great opportunity, period. But I think we're going to do some great stuff with it. So Judy, let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Sure. Stokes.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Leonard.
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're now at the point in the agenda where we will entertain any citizen concerns. We ask that you limit those comments to 3 minutes, and also state your name and affiliation with the village. So Mitzi's already, wow, see? I didn't even get a chance to call you up.
Mitzi Miller. I've lived in Yellow Springs 30 years on West Limestone Street. And first of all, I'd like to thank council and our village manager, and I'm hoping Johnny will experience being in a wheelchair as well as the other council members have the opportunity to do that. It's an eye-opening experience. Even for me, it was being in a wheelchair. The other day, I talked to somebody who had an electric wheelchair, and if you have the opportunity to go on Yellow Springs Open Discussion, I highly recommend you look at my posts and the testimonies of individuals in Yellow Springs who are in wheelchairs and what they've shared. Approximately 1/4 of American families have a family member with a mobility impairment. A mobility impairment is a disability that limits one's ability to a safe and easy way to navigate in our community. Among other challenges, it makes use of public transportation, sidewalks, trying to enter stores very difficult or even impossible. This presents a growing problem in many communities because the number of people with mobility impairments is increasing due to the age of our population, like here in Yellow Springs. As council goes into their work session on goals and priorities and budget sessions for our community, I'm asking you to place a higher priority level on sidewalks and street safety for our community. I'd like our village to pursue more grants and federal funding in this area. We need a village media campaign on educating our residents and property owners on sidewalk ordinances, blocking sidewalks with vehicles and objects, and visual impairments on their property to make it safer for others, and also the removal of snow during the winter months. The Active Transportation Group has provided council members and our village manager with inputs on tool shed concept, organizations that would assist individuals with needs in cleaning up. We are also pursuing using the Yellow Spring High School students as another resource, and our next meeting is actually at the high school. I feel it's in the village hands now to activate these ideas and put these services in place. Certainly issuing a citation would be everybody's last resort, and we don't want to do this, but I can tell you, we need to deal with this issue in a timely manner and make sure we're documenting and following up. There are some people that will choose not to follow our ordinances and will need to be cited or go to mayor's court. Some of my personal complaints made are going on close to a year here in Yellow Springs. And they're valid concerns, and they just haven't been dealt with, I think, properly. If you need to hire a zoning enforcement officer part-time, then consider this in the next year's budget and utilizing additional staff for this purpose. And I just like to end with cleaning off our sidewalks is a responsibility for everybody. And it also shows that we're caring for others. The only other thing I'd like to say real quickly is that I would like to see some way we can get edged Rabbit Run Farm to East Enon Road. I will spend my time in getting volunteers to cut the grass out between the sidewalks. But if the village could find a way to do that, that impacts a lot of people who use, first of all, our high school students going to the high school, but also there are several residents that do a walking trail daily. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitzi. Yeah, and by the way, I think council did get some of the photos that Mitzi shared with us, the rabbit run in particular. Mitzi and I were out there together, and literally 3 feet Mitzi pulled off of the sidewalk. You know, that was just, so yeah, so we really appreciate it. I mean, I'm just going to say I support a little bit more enforcement in this area, but we'll follow up on it. Another citizen concern? Yes.
My name is Marsha Ridgely, and I would really appreciate putting those times on the meeting. I would need a wheelchair to do those sidewalks, sitting in these chairs. But
wow.
I'm actually here to support Mitzi and her ideas, and I am one of those people who do lots of walking around the town, and one of my main routes is down Dayton. And I've seen the brush finally get taken care of, and I've seen the fact that I'm walking, but the sidewalk isn't very clear. You know, it isn't very good for people who are having to use other things. And I also wanted to mention, it was a little ironic that Mitzi had called me to see if I would come to this meeting tonight, because last week I took my little hand clipper on my walk, and I actually ended up clearing places along various sidewalks that I was tired of ducking and dodging and weaving and not wanting to have the leaves in my face and the poison ivy creeping out. So I did what I could do, but if the village could, I know nobody wants to be fined, but I think that people need to know that this is serious. I just think that some people just kind of read it, and it just needs to be somehow brought to the forefront that this is an issue for people who, and people who are, even the new bike path on South College. I trimmed stuff off of that because if I had been riding a bike, I would have been afraid that it would have caught me right here. So I trimmed stuff off of that new path because it just comes down from growing. Then people did some cutting, but then it comes down and it just, they cut, you know, they cut a little bit, but 2 weeks later, it's still growing season. Yeah, comes back up. So I just came to support that.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I'll also say we're like on record time with this meeting, so you probably would not want to come back. All right, please. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, you're allowed to stand up. That's fine. We'll get some cushions. Yeah.
I'll be quick. My name is Mary Cargan. I live on Cedar Court at Friends Care. My concern is the difficulty in getting out of my car onto the sidewalk downtown. I was parked in the parking spot right by Current Cuisine. There were 3 tables with chairs right there along the sidewalk. I had to walk between my car and the curb until I could get to a clear place. And my balance is an issue, and I have to be really cautious. My other just comments real quickly is the handicap parking space at the end of the street has 2 very large containers that block half of that space. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm sorry, which one is that?
It's at the end of the street going north. Handicap parking place.
You know which one it is? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll look into it.
If you have a handicapped person in the passenger side, you can't get out. And there are other places along the street where those 2 containers block half the parking place. So that's all.
All right, thanks, Mary. We will definitely look at that, and yeah, appreciate you sharing that. Any other citizen concerns? Mark Housh?
Since we've got all this extra time.
Watch out.
Really quickly, and I'll stay within my 3 minutes, I promise. I want to thank, my name is Mark Housh. I'm the president of the chamber. I'm a local resident and a business owner. I want to thank the village for the efforts that they've had in ongoing efforts in creating and fixing parking. As far, I know that the parking was just fixed, re-graveled along the Mills lawn. In time for Art on the Lawn, and also in time for us for street fair. I also know that the parking lot down and Cemetery Street will be finished in time for street fair as well. I appreciate the work of Paige, and she's not here any longer, Johnny, and Colin Altman, who's the fire chief, and their extensive work that they're doing with the Street Fair Committee to make it a safe event and for us to be able to coordinate with the village efficiently. Lastly, I do want to mention that the sunflower fields will pop around the 15th or 16th of September. There is going to be a grand confluence of events that weekend because the sunflowers will pop. The wool gathering will happen at Young's Dairy, and that's also Porch Fest, so please be aware of that. Lastly, I know that Josue has promised to cover things about COVID. I appreciate your entry, Brian, as I said in the council packet, but I would encourage the council to take a look at the existing emergency ordinance and bring it into compliance with what CDC recommendations are presently. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark.
I want to say one more thing, if I may.
Sure. Go ahead, Mary.
Very quick.
Yeah.
The last time that there was, the sunflowers were in bloom, people were parking in the cemetery. And they were parking, I mean, it's a one-lane road around the cemetery. They were on the graves. And they were crossing 68 families. It was horrendous. I finally called the sheriff to see if they would come out. So I hope there is some way of encouraging people who go look at the sunflowers. I know they're in a farther field, not to park in that cemetery.
Thanks, Mary.
Can I address that real quick?
Sure, real quick. Yes.
Two things, and Mary, and thank you for bringing that to my attention, because the chamber is going to be operating the sunflower field this year along with Tecumseh Land Trust. We have contracted with the Sheriff's Department to handle traffic flow, but I believe some signage, and I'll work with the township as well to create signage over at the cemetery. It's possible even, because I know the cemetery routing pretty well. Maybe the answer is to block the main entrance to the cemetery, because there are other ways to get in and out of the cemetery by with traffic.
This is the new one we're talking about. I'm talking about the new one.
Oh, the new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should not be happening. I think we can make the Sheriff's Department aware of that.
All right, we'll work on that too. So by the way, Mark, Rap from Trotwood keeps asking me about showing off some EV stations during a street fair. So I don't know if you guys have talked about that yet. But
several times.
I've spoken with Josue several times about it.
All right, if it's possible to accommodate that, I think it's a good fit. John Hempling.
Hi, John Hempling. John Hempling, neighbors, former neighbors. As you know, we put in the packet our proposed first set of changes to the zoning code. I think that our proposal is very much in line with council's 2022 strategic goals, as well as the village's 2020 comprehensive land use plan. Feel like reading those documents that whoever was working on them possibly anticipated that council would go on to consider zoning changes like the ones that we're proposing. As Brian mentioned, we're hoping to present to council at your next meeting on September 6th, asking you to refer our proposal to Planning Commission for further review. We're coming to council first because feel like this set of changes is broad enough that sort of would be good to have council sort of indicate that, yes, this is the policy direction that council would like to go. And just for those watching who haven't had a chance to read the proposal, mainly we're recommending making townhouses, two-family and multifamily housing permitted use in all residential districts. Our proposal also recommends making accessory dwelling units permitted use, although it leaves unchanged for now the many other zoning regulations that apply to ADUs. There's a couple other changes in there that are pretty minor. We've met with staff about our proposal, and I think we've made several changes in response to staff's feedback. I understand that there are some concerns about the impact of zoning changes on infrastructure, but I know that the administration already has some ability to review plans for how they'll impact the land and infrastructure, and I'm sure that if necessary, we could, further changes could be made to make sure that administration has the ability to prevent any adverse impacts to infrastructure. And if you guys have any questions, or anyone watching has any questions, feel free to contact me, John Hempfling, or Matt Raska, or Alex Melamed with any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. All right.
I'm not 5 minutes, 5 seconds.
Sure, yes. I'll give you 5 seconds.
If your staff will edge from Rabbit Run to East Enon Road, I will make your whole crew run.
If I can interject.
Yeah, Carmen.
I think that property is Renee's responsibility.
Yes.
Responsibility, so Renee Laboratories.
Yeah.
Well, I put in a complaint, a formal complaint a year ago.
To Renee, how many formal complaints?
I would say at least 3.
Okay.
4.
I can we can dig into some contact information from them. I mean.
Yeah, no, you're right. And actually.
Renee's property.
Right, and we did talk about this, that we're going to track them down, yeah.
Yes, we have, and we did send letters, and they did do some trimming, and we just, it's a group that we need to exert some pressure on.
Right.
But you're right,
4-inch sidewalk, 4 feet sidewalk, that has grass at least a foot, at least a foot or more, and then grass in between.
Yeah.
Impact use of a wheelchair or any kind of mobility.
I think this will come up in something that we're going to talk about later regarding volunteers in town, but we can address it, I think.
All right, great. All right, no special reports. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I forgot, so I've been up here twice. Talking about the zoning reform coming back next council, which is day after Labor Day.
Yeah.
I will be on vacation. Can we move that to the 19th?
Sure, I guess.
Well,
Yeah,
my understanding is that it's going to come to council and then go to planning commission. It seems like.
Wanted me to speak on infrastructure.
I wouldn't mind, like, unless you don't want to speak to it,
No, I want to speak.
Okay, yeah, so I'd rather have you here, so, all right, so we'll make that adjustment, and I hope that's okay, John. Okay, yes, Riley. All right, and we are wrapping down citizen.
I will keep it brief.
Yes.
Speaking more as a citizen, Riley Dixon speaking as a citizen and a member of the Environmental Commission. Someone came up to me the other day and said they saw a village vehicle idling for approximately 3 hours. This is one of the vans. There were no lines attached to it. It didn't seem to be doing any kind of work. Before coming in here, I saw a cruiser idling out in front of the Bryan Center for God knows how long. I understand that there is software that has to restart every time the cruiser restarts. I think that's unacceptable environmentally. Transportation is one of the leading causes of carbon emissions and like globally. So I would like to see council consider in the coming future a no idling ordinance village-wide, not just for village-owned vehicles, but for all vehicles. This was, a pretty major weekend for the village. I saw motorcycles idling downtown on 68. I saw cars idling for longer than they needed to. I think council could do something here. So
actually, yeah, thanks, Riley. And so I'm just going to jump in on this one. You can go ahead and sit down.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was on my list. And actually, I was thinking about when Paige was here. And it was interesting because after we had our conversation, I talked to several prominent villagers who had idling vehicles in various scenarios. And I said, you actually walked by 5 minutes after like one of them. So that being said, I do want to get a review about why our cruisers idle, because I know we talked about that, and that's why Riley knows that like several years ago. So I want to hear that again, and then otherwise, yeah, let's lodge that, but we don't need to discuss it right now. Okay.
We're certainly bringing it back, and we tried addressing this 2 years ago when we purchased our first hybrid vehicle.
Right.
So we went to this hybrid technology that the hybrid motor, the electrical components keep running and allows the systems to stay synchronized, because the radios have to be synchronized with the cameras and the audio. And
well, let's just put it in your manager's report and like talk about it, formally. Okay. All right. So. And then otherwise, you have the floor.
All right. We made some pretty good time, so I'll take some liberty of adding some items that I didn't have before. A couple of things, updates that you're going to see down the road. It's these updates that I'm going to verbally share now are not included in your packet, so I'm prioritizing those. One of them being the kidney property development. Initially, I had stated that you would be seeing this subdivision come to the September 13th meeting at the Planning Commission. Right now, that timeline, we're not sure if we'll be able to meet that timeline, as we're still waiting on several reports and investigative matters at the site. So we'll know in the next 2 weeks whether we're going to meet that timeline. So if we're not able to meet that timeline, council or Planning Commission won't see it until the October meeting, so that gets pushed back a little bit. If you're wondering why what's going on, last time that you asked for an update, we were looking at if the sanitary system. Initially, the layout required a bifurcated sanitary system. The team opted for a lift station. We obviously have some concerns with the lift station because there's one more piece of equipment to maintain, and so we worked through those issues. We also wanted to ensure that any infrastructure development goes on the site is also forward-looking, which means allowing development around the kidney property to connect through that infrastructure so that we can continue to build out our infrastructure. So there was some back and forth on that. We've come to a really good layout that still allows for future connection of the kidney property. So we're working through some of those things, and that's the brief update on why you might not see it at the September 13th meeting. And I'll have more information by the September 6th meeting, but just wanted to give you some background information on that. Otherwise, thank you, Mark, for the recognition of the parking. We did some major improvements ahead of Art on the Lawn around Mills Lawn. It obviously does not come without criticism, but that is part of the challenge when looking to improve our parking assets and other things. So, but I think overall people were happy at Art on the Lawn. It accommodated a lot more vehicles, and we did it ahead of the back to school activities. On COVID, as you know,
which, by the way, was the main reason for regrading, right? Was
yes,
supporting the schools.
Correct. Initially, Brian and I had a meeting with Judith, Terry, and Megan and others, and we talked about back to school activities, and among them we're looking at reducing the trip hazards around Mills Lawn and just improving the safety condition and the parking assets around Mills Lawn. The timing worked great, and Johnny was able to get it ahead of these schools starting and also ahead of Art on the Lawn. So the stars align on us around after that meeting, and we were able to get all these things done. So,
and the village is also supporting more safety around drop-off, especially given the Safe Routes to School project. So we're providing barricades and helping the schools to facilitate that.
Correct, and keyword helping. I think yes. The schools are taking a lead, an initiative to improve the safety of the drop-off at the schools, and we're providing support around barricades and the cones in their endeavor to improve drop-off at the school. So a lot of things in the works. Okay, on COVID, there are a couple of things that we're tracking on COVID. One is our wastewater viral load. Since March of last year, we've been participating in this initiative. Sorry, March of this year, we've been participating in the state's wastewater monitoring program. So our team takes samples twice a week at the wastewater treatment, and it's sent off to the Ohio State lab where they analyze it for COVID strands and the viral load. Our numbers as the last 2 weeks have been decreasing. So while we've seen an increase in the counties that are high in the transmission rate, as of last Thursday, we were 56 out of 88 counties were on a high transmission rate. So obviously the state is in high transmission rates. In our community, we're seeing the viral load to be decreasing. The viral load at the wastewater treatment facility is considered the early signs of an increase in cases or decrease in cases. And so our data shows that we've been decreasing for a while now in terms of viral load. I think what we're seeing in the high transmission rates is the result of a lot of outdoor activities that have happened that attracted a lot of folks. We had 4th of July and so many other things, and so we're seeing the result of that. Where are we headed? I would like to think that we're heading downwards. I don't know. I think not the expert. I'm following the CDC. I will reiterate of a comment from a citizen that it is important to align with CDC recommendations. We did try that. I believe was it a year ago that we tried bringing our ordinance in alignment with CDC. It did not get the votes that it needed to pass, and so we kept with the existing language. And I don't know where we go from there. But certainly, I think our community is adhering to precautionary practices because our viral load has been decreasing.
But I guess since you brought it up, I mean, what triggers our ordinance is an emergency. And if the state doesn't announce that emergency, it would be incumbent on the village to do so. I think Brianne's written like pages of memos about it that, people could review. But, I think the bottom line is I believe council would be open to talking about, some of the things that have been brought up around street fair and whatnot. But I think also the reason why I included the CDC article is, we've got to sort of be reasonable about what's possible. And I think what, the village has always supported is if any business wants to enforce mask mandates or any other, strategies, we're going to support that. But I'm not convinced that there's a viable strategy that's going to make a lot of sense around reintroducing COVID restrictions. And but I'm happy to entertain that. I think council would talk about it. We have until October 8th for street fair. I think Art on the Lawn felt very safe to me, but we are in a different reality. And that's what the CDC and all the science is speaking to. So, so anyway, but I think if there's something that we're missing, we will certainly discuss it. We've always been at the forefront of this. So I don't know, Marianne, you're leaning in. Did you want to say something?
Well, yeah. I personally, as a council member, do not support having an outside mask mandate, which was one of the requests at street fair. I don't support that. I support people taking care of themselves by wearing their masks if they feel they need to. But I just felt like we've been asked these questions, so I think it's good to just answer them directly. I think I'd like for Josue or Brian, one of the two of you, to repeat again, though, just so that there's clarity, because some of the things I've been hearing have been saying, I think, well, we have an emergency, so therefore we should reinstitute that ordinance. So would you just say again, one of the two of you, where we stand with that ordinance?
And Amy, are you enough up to speed on it to say? But will you come to the mic if you are? Because, you know, it probably will mean more coming from you.
The question is to whether or not council should be reinstituting your COVID ordinance.
Right.
And what should be the trigger point for that? That's an excellent question.
We've had some requests, well, not
Just in saying there is an emergency, therefore council should reinstitute the ordinance. So I think we need to respond to that.
Right, and with the CDC guidelines being not as careful, not providing as much guidance as they were way back when, 2+ years ago, there's probably not going to be a lot of outside guidance for you on that. That's likely to be a decision that you'll just make here amongst yourselves based on the data and the information that you have. I don't know that you're going to have much guidance from the state on that either.
Yeah.
And to be specific, that ordinance does state that, I mean, what Amy's suggesting is council would have to declare a state of emergency in the village of Yellow Springs.
Because once the state, right, once the state took away the state of emergency, that's when ours went on hiatus.
Yeah.
So then that becomes a threshold question. And we could reevaluate that again from the state of emergency perspective. I know from my the time that of March of 2020, I was working for the city of Dayton in the city attorney's office there, and we spent a lot of time reviewing state of emergency process and when it should be implemented. And we could revisit that now, do another review of that, if council would like.
Okay.
Well, it's my sense that council is not prepared to reinstitute the state of emergency. I guess I'm asking for any council member that might feel differently about that.
I'm not prepared to do that.
So we have clarity to respond to.
So, I mean, is anybody else?
I guess I'm in the same boat that I think I heard you saying, which is I'm open to the conversation. I haven't yet seen information that would justify that, but I'm not, that doesn't mean that if we saw information that made it seem like it could make a difference and that we could enforce it and it would be valuable, that it wouldn't be worth discussing. I'll just have not yet seen that information.
Yep. Carmen?
Just thoughts about, you know, mandating is one thing, but how is it enforceable, which is always my question.
Right.
How is it enforceable? And then what kind of participation would that involve of our police department? You know,
right.
So that's always been the question for me, is how the village would go about enforcing it. Would there be citations? Are there officers that are on duty just looking to cite people for not wearing masks? So,
right. And we never did one citation, like when we had the mask mandate.
Right.
Yep. Kevin, you're gonna.
Yeah, and I think
and Amy, we're good. Thanks.
Yeah, to Amy's suggestion, it makes more practical sense for a state of emergency to be issued at a broader level. In other words, we're like one of the smallest entities in the state, and us declaring an emergency, the COVID doesn't recognize, the boundaries of the village, but it would make more sense if a larger entity, either the county or the state, issued, a mandate, and then, we would be within, some larger bubble, so it just really doesn't seem from a practical standpoint for us, in the midst of no one else doing it, to declare an emergency in such a small geographic area.
Well, we did a lot on the front end, but I think I'll reiterate what, Gavin kind of, stated, which is that we're open to talking about it, but I just don't know what it looks like. And so, Mark, you kind of referenced it, so we'll talk about it. I mean, we're your chamber liaison, so. Okay, what else do we got?
What else to close out the topic is, Mark, any businesses that want to have an indoor mask policy, we'll support. We will certainly support it, as we did. I think we had great outreach program and great behavior modeling when we were doing the mask ordinance. think our community has been one of the most, an exemplary community of safe practices. But obviously, we can make all the declarations we want. We're not immune to all the tourists and some of our residents that want to do what they want to do. So,
well, maybe I'll close it out with this.
Okay.
We're not ignoring Han and others. We're not seeing a clear action point. And so, but we're open to what that might be, but we're not ignoring it.
That's a better closing. Thank you, Brian. All right, I have a few other things. One that is not on the agenda is a donation policy. It's something I want to bring back to council. Over the years, we have had great practices regarding helping our most vulnerable communities. If you recall, we have a robust Boots and Coats program where every year we take vulnerable school children to get boots and coats, and we offer food assistance, we offer all kinds of assistance for our families. We are in this time period where heightened sensitivity, making sure that we're doing the right things from a process perspective, but we feel that we're doing the right things because we're here to help people, but we need to outline and write out a lot of our procedures that we've been doing. So a good example of that would be shoring up our donation policy. We receive donations on a variety of projects. Our dog park is a prime example recently. Our dog park wouldn't exist today without the generous support of key community members who put money to ensure that we had the resources to help build the dog park. Our swimming program, we have a Swim for All. We have several community members that donate to our Swim for All program, our youth center. There are a lot of things that folks are supportive of our programming. And most recently, we had a situation where someone became homeless, and we had some donors that wanted to help out, but they didn't want to help out directly because they can't. They want to go through an institution such as the Village. So in the coming weeks and over the next couple council meetings, we'll write up some of these procedures and make sure that you're aware of how they exist and how they operate administratively, so that we all understand what is going on in our effort to help our residents in every way that we can. So I just want to bring that to council's attention, because we just today we're dealing with someone that became homeless and needed some assistance. Other things that I want to bring to council's attention, we have a noise ordinance that is in dire need of a rewrite. There are a couple of things in there that make it difficult to enforce. There are certification requirements that are difficult to meet. In modern technology, where we can get a calibrated device, that oftentimes these devices are self-calibrating. We don't need to have these instances.
I think you might have missed a step. Do you want to explain, like, the ordinance is about the sound detection?
Yes.
Or whatever?
So we have a noise ordinance that does two things. One, it identifies noise levels and what is a violation. So there's decimals that the law will say what's too loud. So we have noise levels for residential areas and commercial areas. The way the law requires us to read those decimal levels is very specific. It's very specific to a device and to a certification that's required for the person who's administering that device. And then there's significant procedure steps that need to be taken.
And then no one does the certification, right?
Right, it's difficult. It's one person out of Washington State, and it's not readily available. And this is not the only way to do this. Technology has advanced much further than our ordinance has, that we need to come to the times on how these noise apparatuses and devices work, and we need to reflect that in the ordinances. So that's one key thing, the devices, how the devices are calibrated, and who can administer these readings. So those are things that we want to improve upon in the ordinances, so that as we're dealing with the various complaints that we're getting, whether they're amplified sound from buskers or a local establishment that's having live music, we need the resources to be able to properly enforce the noise ordinance and follow up with the complaints. So we'll be bringing that up back. Lots in place. All units are leased except for one. We have one pending lease. We hope to be done this month, but that's gone well. All 4 units have been leased and folks are already moved in. So we're happy about that. Cemetery parking lot, I've included in the packet a proposed outline. We're working with TLT and the OPWC, who's the leaseholder, to ensure that whatever we're proposing meets all the requirements. We're also working with the surrounding neighbors to build a buffer area. So we'll create an earth mound for the resident right next to our parking lot, and we'll do some arborvitaes and some shrubs to help provide some sheltering for the property. Safe routes to school has kicked off, so that's underway. And I'll take any questions you may have.
Questions? Yeah, Gavin?
I have a few random questions. Are we monitoring for polio when we do the checking for COVID in the wastewater? I just know that they are doing that, and we are seeing polio starting to spread in the United States. We have a seriously unvaccinated population.
It's an excellent question. We are not. One of the attractive things for us to sign on early on the wastewater monitoring program was that we would have, or the State Department will provide us reports on a variety of things that our community could be tested for. So we haven't revisited that conversation with the state on what additional testing is available, but if that's something that council be interested, or I personally be interested. Initially, when they proposed the things that they were testing for, like drug use and things like that, it just didn't seem like there was a lot of community value for us on those tests, but we'll revisit the conversation. Well, some of them might not be applicable. THC, we got a plant just up the street from so I don't know what useful information that's gonna yield. I'm talking about our grower and processor.
Okay, just these are quick ones. The planning commission you mentioned that might not, the DCI thing might not, sorry if that's the wrong acronym, DDC might not be coming. So does that mean that there may not be a planning commission meeting on the 23rd, or is there definitely a planning commission? Just checking. Burn. And then the one other random one I'll bring up is just wondering if you've had any interaction with MTFR. You know, I know that the school sent a letter that was talking about the prospect of the village, and
we're going to talk about that.
Okay, sorry.
In old business.
Okay.
So, yeah. That joint meeting is out. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's coming up. Carmen? Marianne?
Yeah, I do want to talk about.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about the Barnett remediation effort and the fact that we were told by the United States EPA that there was going to be what they call a statement of basis was going to be coming out, and there was going to be a meeting about that in the spring. So we're in August now, which no one calls August the spring. And Josue, I don't know if we've heard from the EPA.
We have not.
But I am severely disappointed in the EPA. And I mean, we're talking about something that's gone on for over 2 decades. Just the discovery of the groundwater pollution at Barnett and the EPA's involvement in it. And I am there, I just want to register my very much unimpressiveness, whatever that word is, that they don't do what they say they're going to do. And that is not a good thing. So Josue, I'm requesting that you contact them and convey, I mean, if other council members agree, our upsetness with the lack of, I mean, at least if they can't do it, they can call us and say, we're not good. But to just sort of blow it off, which is what it seems like to me.
I will follow up with the US EPA and my contacts there.
And you know, I'm bringing that up in part because I think we got the letter about Sutton Farm and the fact that according to the conservation easement, it wouldn't allow for solar. And that's a longer discussion, but it reminded me that once we start the Vernay remediation, once it's signed off on, I believe that Vernay would be willing to then enter into discussion about what might happen on that property. And solar array has been a primary thing.
Really quickly, just to add, if you get on Vernay's website, there's a copy of the EPA report on the website, along with the video that Vernay was required to make explaining what's happening in the remediation process. At least until 2050, no dwellings housing people can be built on that property. And so the EPA report is also on the Vernay website.
Yeah, but the thing is that as long as the process hasn't been approved, then Vernay is going to hold, they own the property, you know, they're not going to, and once the process is approved through the EPA, then we can negotiate about putting.
If it's on the Vernay website.
But we have to have that statement of basis.
Right.
That's the one thing, like, we can't push anything
And
until
it's not
that
Vernay that's
gets.
holding it up, it's the EPA.
Sure, it's the EPA.
Well, it's a combination of the two. Well, you know, Mary Ann, you've been in the rooms with me in the meetings, to this video that Carmen is talking about. That video, we've criticized it a few times. We presented the video about the plume expanding and contracting when we had our public meeting. I want to say it was late 2019. We had over 100 people up here on the second floor. But I understand your frustration, Marianne. You know, I too am frustrated with it because we devoted a lot of time to check off a lot of infrastructure issues like water main breaks and all these things that could happen about the property. And Vernay was very collaborative on addressing those challenges early on that became part of the statement of basis. Now I feel like the legal team has sort of taken over and things have stalled a bit. So I will follow up with the US EPA and see if we can get this moving forward.
I just want to restate, I wasn't just referring to the video. There's also a lot of literature and reading materials on the website, not just the video.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't want to minimize what's available. I was trying to be very discreet and diplomatically and recognizing that there are citizens in our community that have been very critical about the US EPA's work and Vernay's work. And I got to give them credit that there are things that they identify early on that ended up being true. So for example, when Vernay said the plume was shrinking, the citizen group research showed that it was expanding, and years of data that Vernay was collecting, it ultimately demonstrated that at some point the plume was expanding and then it started constricting, reducing. And so I also want to be sensitive to the work that our citizens have done in this effort and some of the successes that we've had. I was only able to push a lot of things because I have such strong advocacy in our community that really allow us to improve upon the remediation. So Vernay has been a sensitive topic because they were an organization that has deep roots in our community and help bring about a lot of the social fabric infrastructure of our community. And so it's a complicated history to hear this history there. And I think we did a lot of relationship building with Vernay when I came on board to be able to get them to the table. And I think part of that relationship building really allowed us as a team to sit with Ed and the CEO, and the CEO was open to exploring opportunities with the village once the statement of basis was completed. And so we've got the door open, so I want to be sensitive to keeping that door open so that when a statement of basis is finalized, we have some good rapport to build upon so that we can follow up on development initiatives that would be of meaning to our community and our residents.
But I think the ball has been dropped on the statement of basis, so we gotta figure out what's going on. Okay, what else?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, Brian, you asked that we put this in the manager's report.
Yes.
So the Environmental Commission has been studying the issue of the Ellis Pond. We have talked to at least 3 local citizens who have expertise in ponds, lakes, in particular, Yvonne Vaudebancourt, whose fairly lengthy report, and I was included in the council packet, and I hope that it was read. So there were 10 issues that we addressed, the Environmental Commission addressed, and we've made recommendations on 9 of them, really, and some of them are short-term, some of them are long-term. And I think that while there's been some disagreement about some of them, I think in the long-term effort, there is agreement that the pond needs to be dredged, and I think we've included some other recommendations on naturalizing that area. Also, the article in the paper from Peter Townsend, I hope everyone was able to read that, and he actually did send it to me, I think, so I can send it out to council members, the history of it. But Ellis Pond and Ellis Park are important institutions in the village. A lot of people enjoy using that place, and so I think it really behooves us to do what we can to make sure that the pond is vital and that the park is usable. And also, we have a lot of volunteers who are interested in helping with that. And just like the school effort, I think we have volunteers who, and like what Mitzi has been talking about, and given the finances that are, the financial situations that are happening, I imagine that it behooves us to consider using volunteers and people who really want to help. So for example, one of the efforts would be having volunteers help remove the plants, or some of the plants at Ellis Pond. I think we need to be able to talk, EC needs to be able to talk with staff so that we can be on the same page about things. And I would like council's approval for EC to develop a plan in which we would say exactly what we would do to have volunteers help remove some of the vegetation. I don't feel comfortable getting volunteers organized and doing something without council approval. And I'm going to turn it over to Carmen to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so let me just first start by saying that we have a plethora of resources in this area. It's almost insurmountable, the amount of expertise, students, people who are willing to volunteer, who just need a way to be able to do that. Without the burden being so much on council, well, and village manager. So this is important that we have a streamlined way for people who want to help with different projects in the village to do that. This is layperson's stuff, and this is probably solicitor. This is definitely solicitor stuff. There is U69, it's workers' compensation coverage for the state and political subdivisions policy. I'm just going to read it. So ORC 4123.03 authorizes the Bureau of Workers' Compensation to offer the state and any political subdivision workers' compensation contract coverage for individuals in its service when those individuals are not considered employees according to RC 4123.01. So the contract coverage is optional. It's not mandatory. So it's used for non-emergency volunteers, probationers performing community services, juveniles between the ages of 11 and 18 who could do things like fix the sidewalks at Vernay, at the Vernay property, which is Rabbit Run Farm, who could do things like provide the physical labor that's going to be involved in removing plant material from Ellis Pond. So I don't know what that looks like, and this is going to be a conversation that we're going to have to open up in order to get that done. But I think that this particular coverage would be something that would be an asset for the village to have. So when we have, for example, we have kids who get in trouble and they end up at Greene County Juvenile Detention Center. And there are kids, but they have to go to Xenia or Fairborn to do their community service. They should be able to do that here. There are adults who, you know, are in the same kind of situation. They have to do their services in other places. I don't know, this is just something that I think that would be beneficial for the village to think about what kind of getting this coverage would look like, and then building a roster, you know, per committee that could have people, you know, provide sweat equity, I guess, in the village, or intellectual equity, which is what we've gotten from Dr. Vanderbekoor and Dr. Candia.
So one thing I'll highlight here is recently the Ohio Department of Natural Resources went through a process of how to encourage more volunteers. And so kind of working off of ORC, and this was with the trail community. So we can bring that into this as well. Because they figured out a way to basically get something that people can sign. Yeah.
Right, so like just a waiver situation?
Yep.
Okay.
So I love that idea. I think that's really good. Okay, so go ahead, Gavin. Yes.
I have a question about the pond.
Okay.
Is that okay? I didn't.
You mean you're moving to another topic?
Yeah, I was trying.
Okay, so before you do that, one of the things I took from the report, and so I'd also like to give the village team more time to absorb, and EC, is, and I talked to Yvonne, was the aspect of we're not in a danger zone right now. And that has guided my feelings in my decisions, is that I'd like to take a little bit more time to make sure that we're putting things in place. So I don't know if Marianne, we're talking about tonight, we need to say the EC can think about planning, but I can't imagine that any of us are opposed to that. I mean, I don't know about the volunteering thing or whatever, but there are other aspects we should figure out a plan for the the natives around the pond. I don't think anybody's opposed to that. I mean, we got to figure out some logistics, but I don't know. But I think those things, it would make sense to move forward with.
I think the specific thing that Carmen was talking about that we want legal advice on is if we have volunteers work, how are the ways that we need to have coverage, and that would be one of the ways, I guess. That also removing plant material from the pond could, there's some danger, there's some risk there. So I think that it behooves us to have a solid plan in place about how it would be done. And I don't want the Environmental Commission to spend time working on such a plan unless, one, we talk with staff, and two, that council says, yeah, go ahead and come back. And I would want to come back to council with the plan before enacting it.
So really quickly, in order to kind of move this forward, I think that EC can come up with a plan of action, first steps, by next council meeting.
That involves talking to staff.
That by next council meeting, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, what we're going to do first. After we have a conversation with staff regarding how we are going to first start removing plant material from the pond. Because what's happening is, you're right, we're not in a danger zone. it's not aesthetically pleasing for a lot of people.
Right.
There's more plant material than there is algae. And the only part of the pond that is approaching maybe being anoxic is the north end of the pond that's completely stagnant. That's it.
Yep.
So we do have time, and we're approaching the time of year where we're gonna get dormancy. So the stuff is gonna start to die back.
Yep.
And it's a good idea to start working for a plan for the beginning of fall until we can't work anymore. So I think that if we could agree to kind of have EC kind of reconvene and then put a plan in place like that involved like actionable items.
I mean, and I think, that's a commission's responsibility is to communicate back to council. So, I mean, I don't know. I think you guys have it, and I just hope that you're talking to staff about it. So, Gavin.
Okay, I do have one pond-related question for a sec. I thought you were moving on to another thing, and I wanted to.
I thought you were moving on to
No, I
another
do.
thing.
I have another,
Okay.
but on the pond question. So I've heard several villagers have said something, have asked me about the cost of the herbicides, or, sorry, what's the right word? Is that it? Herbicides? So is that something that we can like return or resell? This is one of these things where people are like, if we're not going to use it, that can we return it? I've heard multiple people sort of talk about it as though it's like we just spent all this money and it's a total waste. And I'm just wondering, is that something that if we are not planning on using it, that we can recoup those funds? Just a question.
We're working with the contractor about the chemicals. Now, Johnny announced the figure of what it was, and that figure was inclusive of labor, probiotics, and there are a few services that I've shared with Mary Ann and the EC about what those quote include. So the portion of which was the Polisacor, the aqua side, it makes up a smaller element of that overall price. But I want to highlight that our proposal included killing the plants, which are invasive plants, and treatment of removing the dead material, removing the dead plant, and rebalancing the pond with a probiotic component to rebalance the pond. It also included damming up the pond while the application would take place. So the figure that we released a couple of weeks ago included all those other services. So we weren't just going to nuke the plant and the pond and leave it like that. No, it's a very comprehensive strategy to deal with the pond, the challenges of pond, in a way that's cost effective. I think we're on the same page. Our dream is to dredge the pond and reconstitute a local ecology, a local ecosystem for the pond. But that's also costly money, which we don't have. And if we did, we also have priorities like ADA equipment in our playgrounds. We don't have ADA appropriate equipment at two sites, Agon Park and the John Bryan Center. So, there's capital that if we had, we would, there are other things that we can use them for. You've heard so many folks talk about sidewalks. Replacing sidewalks can go a long way. So I think we ultimately dream of a world where we could dredge the pond and reconstitute the local ecosystem of the pond, but that's going to take a lot of work and time. And I think I hear what you guys are talking about and want to create an action plan. I think we're in different spaces of where we see the solution being. And I don't know how we come together on that. I hear you want to have a volunteer program. I've spoken with the past solicitor, I've spoken with a risk assessment team, and it's clear that it's very risky asking volunteers to get into a pond where the conditions are unknown, they can be dangerous, and there's a lot of liability there. It's a lot of risk to take on.
I find it a little bit dismissive that you think that this is not something that we've considered. It is not flippant. It's not without a great deal of forethought. That's why I brought up what I brought up tonight. This is not impossible. It's not even legally impossible. Other municipalities do it. Larger municipalities rely on volunteers and the services of volunteers to do much more complicated work. and we have the resources here. We have already gotten the assistance and the service of 2 PhDs for free, one of which is interested in monitoring the pond for free. I feel like it's the village's responsibility to make the path of least resistance for people who want to benefit this community and benefit this village. And if we had some kind of volunteer organization, then we wouldn't have to trouble Johnny with trimming the Dayton Street Vernay property or removing grass from sidewalks. There are people here who are willing to do it, and it's our responsibility to make it happen for the people who want to give their time and sweat equity and other equity in this community. We have too many resources around us and in this village to not take advantage of it. We need to figure out how to do it.
Would it maybe be a thought to do something like a subcommittee to deal with this? I feel like at this point, if I were tuning in, I would have absolutely no idea what anyone was talking about. It has gone very many directions. I think a lot of people feel very strongly and passionately about that space. I think a lot of people want to help. I think different entities believe that it's their responsibility to take those actions, and I think that there's so many moving parts that I'm not quite sure I see it coming together.
Well, we have an environmental commission. I mean, the only thing I do want to, and I think Carmen would agree with maybe, is volunteers are great, but it also does, require management and investment and whatever. So that's not like a pushback to say that it shouldn't be an effort, but just to recognize that it will be an effort. Okay, well, I feel like we talked enough about the pond. And I mean, to me, like part of it is, I just want to come back to, there's nothing toxic going on. Yeah, a few fish don't need to go to the north end, stay on the south end, they'll figure that out. But I want to, I think we've got some time to work on this, and I think there's some cool ideas spinning off of it as well. All right, Gavin, is this last one quick?
Yeah. Well, I think so. It's just, you brought up in the manager's report the solar project at Sutton Farm. We heard a presentation from AMP previously about solar prices. It was, frankly, made a really strong case to invest in solar. I guess I'm just wondering if at a future meeting, you could provide an update on sort of the projects in the pipeline or what's being considered from the village. I guess I heard that presentation from AMP and thought, wow, we should really act now, and then see the letter from TLT and think, oh, bummer on this one. But would love to know, do we have other ideas? Where else could we do things? How fast could they go? And then also I'll just say, as a homeowner, have been thinking about whether or not to put solar on and wondering, could we provide more solar to more homeowners in a aggregated way, which is something that our solar contractor, raised as a prospect of how communities provide access. So particularly right now, while the cost is low, it seems like an amazing deal, plus awesome, impacts on the climate. So just wondering if you could bring it up at the next meeting.
So I feel like we need to dedicate time to that because it's been referenced, but we've always got a million things to talk about. And it also reminds me, the other thing I want to put in the advanced parking lot is I was disappointed a couple weeks ago to read the editorial that said the village has done nothing tangible around affordable housing, which is absolutely false, and probably a statement just that was tied into some other emotions. But besides loss in place, we were hoping to talk tonight, but I don't think we have time, about some of the other projects that are on the list, which includes Duncan Park, but there are 2 other, at least, viable options around affordable housing. So I want to make sure we prioritize both of those for the next meeting. But I feel like we need to kind of start moving to wrapping things up, unless anyone has anything else. Marion?
No, but are we doing the old business report?
Yes. So, and like, what I wanted to focus on is what Gavin started to bring up. Judith and Marilyn Moore, Judith Hempfling, Marilyn Moore, and I had a great meeting on Saturday, which has been tied to discussions this topic has really led up to, is that the coordination around the elected bodies that are taxing bodies needs to be stronger. And when Marianne and I put effort into starting the Yellow Springs Development Corporation, that was a central tenet. It doesn't seem to be the focus, and that's fine. Organizations go in different directions and have lots of things they can do. But my sense is that folks are excited about it. I think we all see the need for this. And so we came up with an idea of what an agenda, or starting to think about what an agenda for a first meeting could look like, which in part is each body spending 10 to 15 minutes talking about what the financial issues are. I mean, this is where we're going to need you and Terry. And then starting to talk about opportunities of how we can potentially share services, which, if Johnny was still on, we were always thinking about joint grant, applications and whatnot. And Marilyn even mentioned that, maybe after that first meeting, that encourages a second meeting where, when citizens have their heads wrapped around it more, can contribute more as well. So we're looking at probably early October. I mean, if we can make it happen before then. But I wanted to make sure that that felt good to everyone here. And I think that that's a really important action step to how we're going to, address our affordability issues. So that's my spiel on that.
Brian, can you just be specific about, when you say taxing entities, do you mean representatives from the school system?
So we're actually talking about, at least this first meeting, I think all the elected officials should be able to participate, and I think we're all going to want to. So, I mean, we had talked about whether, we would pull off representatives, but I think this initial meeting, we have not done this in forever. I think we did one early on in my council career, but I think, all school board members, township trustees, and council members would be invited. And we'd also, have it so people can, participate virtually. And, I think the initial agenda is pretty straightforward, really. It's what we've been talking about. We've got a limited pool. Here are the needs. And then we start looking at that.
And would council be the convener?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Gavin.
So did the township, did they communicate about, so there was a letter to the editor that was written about the question of the sort of premise of the firehouse levy, and I've heard that echoed by several people in the community. I'm wondering if they have addressed this. The only concern I have about the timeline you mentioned of October is that the levy will be in November, and I'll just say, I'm trying to figure out how to vote, and I think a lot of other people are too, and I'm concerned that we're having the conversation so late that we're not able to have a informed citizenry.
We could definitely,
wondering what you think about that.
We could definitely try to pull it in earlier, for sure. And I will say, too, I think the start of your question, Don Hollister had planned to be at this meeting to talk about their support for this joint meeting. And, I told him we were going to discuss this. But his intention was to come and to, indicate the township support. So.
Well, he's not here. So
because I told him I was going to be talking about this already. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So did they answer the question about the context as it pertained to the firehouse levy?
I think that's part of what this meeting would elucidate, so.
Okay. I just think we have an interesting, responsibility as council members. There are lots of priorities that the village has identified that require revenue. There are other priorities that are related. It seems as though elected bodies collectively, nobody could be blamed, I guess, individually, although I think Don has taken some responsibility in this particular instance. There are people who are more responsible than others, but we've been kicking the can collectively for a really long time.
Yeah, well, I have no disagreement that I'm happy with moving that meeting up. I've got the indication everyone's interested, and and in particular, I was really excited to hear like the feedback from Marilyn and Judith. So
okay, and I'm just saying it out loud to the public and to the whole body here. What I've said in Finance Committee meeting, which is, I think I want to say I think we should continue to push as a council because the lack of coordination has had serious impacts, and the lack of prioritization, so that as we're about to enter our budget conversations, we talked about dredging the pond. Well, we should talk about that in the context of all of our other needs, and we have to discuss that across the board with the other taxing entities. So anyway, just saying that so we're all on the same page.
Yep. Cool. All right. So anything folks want to highlight around boards and commissions? Okay. Future agenda items? I think we've got plenty, but if anyone has anything they want to highlight?
I've got notes if you want them.
Yeah, and just as a side note, remember our next meeting butts up to
Labor Day.
Labor Day. Oops. So yeah, so we'll be meeting on Tuesday. Okay. So I'm sure we're good on notes then, and we always send the draft agenda out. So if nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Don't hear any opposed. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Thank you, I think.
Yes. And Judy?